What's going on, everybody? Tim from Tirfon Orbital. It's a Jawas Junkyard kind of week for me. So I would like to go over an install commission that I completed on a Ronin from Jawas Junkyard. This is not the first Ronin that I have installed. However, it has been a minute since I've had a Ronin from Jawas come across my desk. So I thought it would be a good time to update the chassis that I had for this particular hilt. Hilt was sent to me by the client. It is not weathered. The client did not want it weathered. The client also already wrapped it with like an Ito style wrap, so I didn't have to wrap it, thankfully. I probably would have mangled that. So it was just essentially a very simple install for me. I designed a new chassis. This is a removable chassis setup. I did do some I added my own upper PCB for that 6-rail PCB connector. So we'll talk about all of that when we do an up and close. I do want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis, right? So let's do that right now. Let's come into Fusion and take a look at this guy. So here is the chassis that I designed for this hilt. Can you tell what hilt it's for? I don't even know. This is for a Jawas Junkyard Ronin. All right, so listen, just typical amount of completely unnecessary greeblies along each side of this chassis. It is a little bit of a thin internal diameter in this hilt. It's 1 inch all the way through. So I chose to go with a 22 millimeter Nano Elite speaker from Smugglers Outpost. I cannot, recommend these speakers enough. I almost prefer using 22s to the 24 millimeter speaker. They're easier to work with. They're easier to design a chassis around. You can fully enclose it, and they perform, in my opinion, almost the same as a 24 millimeter speaker. So we've got a 22 down here. Up top, I've got a Proffie board. So this is a tilted Proffie board setup. I do have a Proffie V3 in this particular build. Kill switch is right here. Around the other side, we've got 2 slots for very, very small Edison filaments. So these are 19 millimeter Edison filaments without the leads. It's almost like 10 millimeters. I've never tried using these smaller ones in a chassis, so I figured, why not? Let's give it a try. So I've got 2 of them here. They are their own blade in the config, and they just blink and pulse. Up top, we've got a 6-rail PCB. This is from Stardust Sabers. That is what makes a connection to the upper part of the hilt. That's how we light our upper lit PCB and get to the switch legs as well. And that's it, right? Just some like really basic, grooves and channels, greeblies along the spine there. And that's it. Happy with the way this chassis came out, right? So let's come up top. So here it is. This is the Ronin from Jawas Junkyard. So I have already taken off the pommel for the demo. We'll go over how to remove and put that on when we put the chassis in. But as I said, this came to me unweathered, clean. It was already wrapped, really, really nicely wrapped. Okay, it's very, very simple setup with this. I've got a PCB that holds the male end of that 6-rail PCB. It also houses my leads for my switches, right? So the way I do that is I've got underneath this upper switch control box section, I've popped a hole and threaded a very small M3 grub screw, and that holds that upper chassis in place. And then I put everything back together, pull my switch leads up through this control box, and then wire up my switches, and then we're good to go. Really interesting control box, super simple setup. We just got 2 brass hat tactiles that they're held in place with this upper plate, right? And that's it. Really, it's a beautiful hilt. It's a nice hilt. So here is the chassis. I have done my usual pass of pewter and onyx or pewter and black rub and buff on this guy. Kill switch is right here. Here is our battery tray, Proffie board. This is, again, I say this all the time. I actually really like having a tilted Proffie like that. You don't have to slide it up. There's plenty of room to pull your SD card out or plug your USB in if you need to, right? And there is that 22 millimeter speaker. So this speaker is, you'll probably notice that the speaker is a little bit deeper than normal. It goes past the lip of this chassis. That is because this pommel, when you put the pommel on, it presses the chassis up into that PCB, the male end of the PCB. And you don't want any distortion because this is going to be, it's going to butt up against the bottom of that chassis. So I recessed it a little bit so when you get vibration with the speaker, it's not going to hit the bottom of the pommel, right? So let's use this guy. Spring side is your negative. Flat part of your battery goes in the chassis. So there are those two very tiny Edison filaments. First time using those. Pretty cool application, right? So once you get your battery in, slide your chassis into the hilt. Take your pommel, right? So there is one single set screw that holds this pommel in place. I like to line up the holes with each other. Then you kind of you want to push the pommel up so it's pressing that chassis up into the upper part of the hilt, and it also helps to line up that hole. Get your screw in and just tighten that screw down. You're ready to go. All right, let's come down to the bottom. Man, these 22s, I love these 22 millimeter speakers from Smugglers. I really do. I think they're phenomenal. I mean, if you look at the magnet, compare a 24 millimeter speaker compared to the 22 millimeter speaker magnets, they are almost the same. I mean, obviously the 22 millimeter is a little bit wider, but they almost have the same depth. So it's just a great performing speaker. All right, so let's get a blade in this. Okay, so this is a 1-inch blade holder. So unfortunately, with the Ronin, Jawas Ronin, this is like an M2 size set screw, very, very small set screw. I don't use M2 set screws. I refuse to. I also don't have Allen key that is small enough for that set screw. You as the client, that you should have received this when you got your hilt. You should have received an Allen key, but I don't have one. I don't use them. So we're just going to put the blade in just to make sure it activates, right? It's a really tight blade holder. Luckily, it's tight enough to hold the blade in. Let's see what else we put on here. So top, the switch configuration, top button is your aux, bottom is your main. Majority of these fonts have also been set up with color wheel. To access color wheel, you want to hold down main and tap aux. I always get that wrong. Hold down aux and tap main. When you find a color you like, tap main again, and it will lock that color in. One more.
Ascension. Don't talk back to your elders, child.
One more. Really nice hilt. it feels really nice in hand with that wrap on there, right? So anyhow, that's all I got. To the client, thank you very much for trusting me with your install. To the viewers, if anyone has any questions about this particular install or anything really, please do not be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.